Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we are back with another brand new Mattel Jurassic World Rebirth release. Yes, we recently had dove into Wave 2 of the Frenzy packs. Now we get to take a sneak peek of Wave 2 of the Gigantic Thrashers, as we have the CHILANTAISAURUS. Now this one I've actually heard pronounced different ways. I've heard it pronounced CHILANTAISAURUS like I've just said it, but I've also heard it pronounced like CHILANTAISAURUS. I think the actual pronunciation is CHILANTAISAURUS, but I could be wrong, so we'll see. I've always pronounced it that way, so again, I'm not entirely sure, but pretty confident that's how you pronounce this one. But I do have to give a massive shout out to my good buddy David, who sent this one over to me. He found it in his area. I'm not actually sure which store he found it in or how he acquired it, but he did let me know that he was sending this and another figure over to me so that I could get some reviews up for them and, of course, get them here into my collection. So a massive thank you, as always, goes out to him for helping me to acquire, some super cool figures that I do not already have in my collection. So again, thank you so much to my buddy. But the figure itself looks super, super cool. Again, you can see the sculpt looks really nice on this one, and the paint apps as well, I actually really quite enjoy. You can see the box art is pretty much what you would expect, of course, with the nice shot of the Spino over here, and then here on the back, just basically a shot of the figure itself, and then down here, we do have another image here of the other figure that is in this wave, which is the Purosaurus. But let's go ahead, pop this box open, and check it out. So here is our CHILANTAISAURUS, and looking really quite nice, honestly. I would say as far as the paint apps go, it's probably one of the cooler looking paint schemes I've seen from Mattel in a little while, and of course the way that they've applied light and dark tones make the colors of this one pop very, very nicely. And of course the sculpt itself is also quite nicely done. You're always going to have a little bit of a Mattel feel to it, a little exaggeration to the figure, but overall I would say it looks quite nice as far as the sculpt goes. So if we go ahead, get nice and close, start here in the head sculpt, we can see that the detailing, as per usual when it comes to recent Mattel, is fantastic. There's a good bit of variation to the skin texture and even the style of skin texture, as we have some really nice traditional but varying sizes of scales for the lower jaw, and then you've got some kind of similar style scales like that up here, but you also have a lot of kind of bumpier scales. You can see some large sort of osteoderm like scales and stuff, and they do extend up here toward the top of the head. We can see the nostrils as well as some nice detail there around the eye. There's a bit of coloration here in the face as we have a white. Then we've also got kind of almost like a metallic purplish tone, and then you have some black as you move back that just kind of patterns through, and I think the coloration here in the face looks super cool. I'm not normally a fan of that kind of satiny look, that kind of shiny look, and again almost somewhat metallic that they have going on, but in this case I think it actually looks pretty cool. I also like the red eye. I think the red eye looks really nice, and it looks like we even have a little variation of color. Almost looks like there's a gray kind of outlining the pupil, and then of course a black pupil, and then a nice gloss coat. I would love to see Mattel incorporate, more high quality eyes in their figures, because this one does have a little bit of a higher than normal quality look to it, and I think it looks excellent because of it. I also really quite enjoy the reddish tone that we see here, kind of extending back from the lower jaw. You can see we have a darker variation of a grayish tone for the lower jaw that very nicely transitions to a red as you move back, and then the red extends down here into the throat before disappearing, leading down. I think that also looks really quite nice. And of course, we have those newer, much sharper looking teeth on this figure, which makes every new Mattel figure that does include that so much nicer than older Mattel figures. We can clearly see we have an articulated jaw, which is the upper and lower jaw. That's part of the action feature. But the teeth look really good. They're very nicely sculpted, painted with a light yellowish tone. We have the tongue there on the inside of the mouth, painted with a pinkish tone, very impressively textured, and a nice gloss coat in there. And the pink does run the entire way through the inside of the mouth and looks really nice. As you move up to the top of the head, you have almost like a scoot-like sort of appearance that moves down along the center of the head back into the neck region, and we see that extend down here to the bottom of the neck and actually along almost the entire back of the dinosaur. As you lead back, we do still have that light tone of color, kind of like an off-white. Yeah, I would say of an off-white, but you also have a little area of some greenish color that picks up and kind of patterns along the back of the neck right here. and I think that's the only area that we really see that greenish tone. So definitely a good bit of variation of color as you move through this one. As you lead down here, again, you start to see some more of those really bumpy scales, but then you get much finer, again, more traditional scales as you move down here into the side. A few skin wrinkles and creases as you lead down, and then you start to see that black tone of the body color pick back up here in the neck before pretty much overtaking most of the figure as you move down into the body. We do see the white extend down here and then disappear, and I really like that they've done that because, you know, so many times you'll see Mattel just have such an abruptly weird transition where you have one section that extends down into another section and the color doesn't really follow. So I like that they did follow it and end it quite nicely as you lead down there. The skin texture, again, continues to look really nice. You've got some osteoderms popping up here and there, mixing with some nice scales. You obviously could see we do have neck articulation, again, part of the action feature. But as we move down into the arm, again, the skin texture looks super impressive, really vibrant. We do have the black for the arm, but as you move down, you have some more of that white that patterns down here. As you lead toward the hands and into the wrist, we've got some very nicely sculpted fingers. We as well have scoots down those fingers, and because the claws are a nice softer material and the entire arm in general is, you have much sharper looking claws on the figure, which again is a nice addition to this one. And the fact that the wrist isn't really pronated is also quite nice. But you can see we do have arm articulation forward and back, and also out away from the body, so pretty much the standard when it comes to Mattel figures. Moving into the stomach, you can see the scales again looking really quite nice. Some more wrinkles as you move down to the bottom of the stomach right here, and as you move up, you've got those kind of armored scoots following along the spinal column. You can also see how this white starts to sort of break up, and then we just have like little splotches of it here as we move into the hip region, and then it's gone after that point, unfortunately. But at the same time, I think it works pretty nicely. Mattel has done a pretty good job of giving this one a nice paint job, if you ask me. You can also see the rib cage kind of shining in the stomach region as you move along. But as we lead here into the leg, you've got again some more nice scales. You've got a lot of really bumpy, kind of rocky scales as you move down as well. You have some nice muscle definition in the thigh. We can see the kneecap right here on the front of the leg, a nice big bulging calf muscle as we move down. And as we lead down into the ankle, you can see, yep, we do have a swivel here as well, so you can articulate the ankle and foot area. And then leading down into the foot sculpt itself, you've got a really nice appearance with some scoots down the toes. The claws, again, looking pretty good, even though they're not technically like that softer material. They do have a little bit of a sharp look to them, pretty much as sharp as I would expect, you know, them to have when it comes to something like this. And even though the figure kind of, you know, doesn't, I guess, technically have nail paint that's different from the body, it does have the look of being painted because, again, we have a black for the body color, so that is also nice. And they've added a gloss coat to those claws, which does help to kind of make it look like they are painted. And we do have dew claws back here as well. But you also, of course, have leg articulation forward and back, kind of jerky as they've been lately, but that's pretty much just how the legs are nowadays on Mattel figures. Also, there is the fax app code if you would like to add this one to your collection before I forget. As you move up, you've got, again, some more trailing osteoderms, like large, rocky kind of osteoderms. You also have more of those scoots moving along the back of the tail. And then as you lead out, you pick up a very large ridge line here, kind of like super big at this point. But you can see they start out kind of small, get pretty huge, and then decrease in size as you lead out, with a few more kind of osteoderms following out along the tail. There's also a nice curve to the tail, which you can see when you look at it from this position. And then when you look at it from over here, of course, it's going to pretty much look the same as what we had seen on the first side, outside of the fact that the leg is trailing, of course, on this side compared to leading on the other side. And the tail is going to look slightly different as far as the curvatures go from one side to the other. Of course, the tail is slightly too short, which is very common, but overall, I don't think it's short enough that it's a major eyesore or anything like that. But man, this is definitely a really nice looking figure. I would say probably one of the best of the Gigantic Thrashers line, and you know, I don't know how it's going to compare next to the Purosaurus because I actually don't have that one quite yet, but even though that is an exciting species, I feel like it's going to have a hard time beating this one out as far as the overall visual goes. As far as a size for the figure, for a length from the snout to the tail, about 14 inches, almost on the dot, or around 35.5 centimeters. And then for a height, I'd say just shy of 6 inches or around 15 centimeters. For a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus, Robert Muldoon, and the Collect Day human being next to our Chilantasaurus. And you can see, again, it is pretty decently sized, especially when it comes to, you know, gigantic trackers or gigantic thrashers, as these newer ones are called. They usually have a pretty decent size to them. Here is a wild roar comparison, as we have the Jurassic World Rebirth Utah Raptor stepping in next to our Chilantasaurus to show you that, again, the Utah Raptor is a little smaller. And then one final comparison, because I really don't think we need very many, as we have the Tyrannotitan, which is from the first wave of Jurassic World Rebirth figures, again from the Gigantic Thrashers line, next to our Chilantasaurus, showing you that these two are pretty much the same size next to each other. Also, probably two of the coolest looking as far as the color schemes go that Mattel has released in quite some time, which is interesting to see that that is a pretty common trend in the Gigantic Thrashers line, and also the fact that both of these theropods have red throats. Interesting. Just something I noticed right now, but obviously you can see that they are pretty much the same size. And then as far as the action feature goes, again, it's one of those situations where you use the tail, and before I even go too far, you do have a swivel area of articulation right here, before I forget about that. But you, of course, push the tail up, and the head snaps down. You push the tail down, and the head snaps up. You can twist it, it snaps sideways, so you basically have the ability to kind of, you know, have your dinosaur attack whatever way you want. You can even tilt it and have him attack with a tilt, which is very, very cool. Again, when it comes to something like this, the action feature is pretty awesome for any sort of a theropod. So another absolutely beautiful Mattel figure here. The Chilantasaurus is fantastic from head to tail, if you ask me. Sculpt-wise, again, it is super impressive, very impressive fine detail. The scale detail is extremely vibrant. There's a good bit of variation to the type of scales. You've got scoots, osteoderms, all kinds of stuff as you move through the body of this one. Mattel has really been outdoing themselves, I think, when it comes to the sculpts of their figures over the last probably few months, especially when it comes to the Rebirth line. But they've really been doing a great job on the fine detail for a long time. But it's never been better than it is right now, showing you that Mattel has just been continuing to improve when it comes to their sculpting skills. And their newest figures, again with the Rebirth line, have easily been some of the best they've ever produced. And again, we've got another really nice one here, not to mention a very, very cool species choice, as I really only have one other figure in my collection of this species, and it's a much smaller version that was released from Vitae years back. But I'm very excited to now have a nice larger version, especially one with articulation, with this release from Mattel. The paint scheme is also quite nicely done. Been pretty happy when it comes to the Gigantic Thrashers paint applications, and I can definitely say the same for this one. It actually has a good bit of variation of color. Normally you'll get like 3 to 4 variations of color, and that's like including eyes and stuff on Mattel figures, but this one actually has quite a bit. You've got the like purplish tones in the face, then you've got some blacks, you've got dark gray, you also have red, you have the white, you've got a little bit of like a greenish tone on the back of the neck, and then of course the coloration inside the mouth, the eyes, everything like that. But definitely a good bit of color applied to this one, and I think the color scheme looks really cool, very appealing as a whole, so that is definitely a massive plus for this one. The articulation is also quite nicely done, works very smoothly, and of course you've got a very cool action feature on top of everything. So if you are interested in this one should start showing up pretty much everywhere at some point in the very near future. Of course, you know, once some Wave 1 stuff clears out, you should start to see some Wave 2 stuff appearing in your local stores. So once you can find it, definitely pick it up and like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.